Hi, I'm Reverend Dr. Stephanie Redfeather, and I'm glad you're here with me to talk about and play in this field of this very important topic of what sovereignty is. It is a rich and deep topic. There are many ways to approach a conversation like this because there's a lot of close cousins to sovereignty that always come up when we have conversations that include power, inner authority, self-governance, and just the wisdom of living from the inside out. But sovereignty is not a simple concept. It is a lived experience. It's a way of inhabiting yourself that is felt in your nervous system. It is experienced in your choices and your boundaries and your very presence. And because we've inherited so many distorted models of power, models rooted in hierarchy, obedience, external authority, reclaiming sovereignty requires more than information. It requires a journey. And so, what I want to take you through today is an archetypal journey, one that moves us from separation to wholeness through three profound internal forces: the heretic, the healer, and the holy. These archetypes live within all of us, no matter our gender, our background. They represent parts of us that question and parts that mend and parts that finally stand in the truth of who we are. And so, as we explore each of these archetypes, you'll begin to see where your own power has been shaped or suppressed or split, and how it can be restored in a way that is grounded and coherent and entirely your own. So, this is not about adopting a new identity or performing a new version of power. It is remembering what has always been yours. And so, before we start with the first leg of our journey, exploring the heretic archetype, I want to share the structure that you can expect as I go through each of these transmissions. So, for each of the four sections, the heretic, the healer, the holy, and then the new paradigm of power, I've outlined the essence of the transmission, the courage gate that one must pass through, and the core invitation. And these elements are outlined in a free PDF summary I created that accompanies this video transmission. So I invite you to locate that now so you can follow along or take notes as you desire. And so, in addition to these elements, the essence, the courage gate, and the core invitation, I will be offering you some experiential and embodiment practices to bring this out of the conceptual realm and into your personal experience and into the felt sense of the body. So let's begin exploring this archetype. So the first gate, the first level, if you will, the first quality that we are going to investigate is the heretic. And the temple teaching is about the fire of truth. So this is where the journey begins. This is the part of us that is willing to see through the illusion and say, no more. The heretic represents the aspect of power that refuses false authority. The moment that we stop outsourcing truth to external systems, whether that's religious, political, familial, even spiritual. How many times in your life have you been cut down or judged, dismissed, ridiculed, or even called profane when you dared to question authority, when you dared to be defiant, when you dared to do your own thinking? For most of us, the heretic was exiled early on. We received clear messages, whether that was spoken or implied, that questioning authority made us difficult, ungrateful, disloyal, too much, insert your particular adjectives that you were called. Over time, this conditioning really creates a subtle but very pervasive form of timidity in the psyche. It is a hesitation to trust our own perceptions. It's a softening of a voice. It's of our voice. It is a shrinking of our instincts. And so when we internalize these consequences that we experienced, we learn to not just censor ourselves, but pre-censor ourselves before anyone else even has the chance to censor us for us. We do it automatically. And this is how self-doubt is manufactured, not because we lack insight or because we lack capacity, but because we were trained to betray our own knowing in order to belong. So recognizing this is the first step in reclaiming the power of the heretic. This timidity is taught, but the truth sense beneath it remains intact. So it's important to understand that the heretic is not the part of us that rebels compulsively or lashes out against structure or authority, right? This is not the energy that we are invoking. The heretic is the one who refuses to abandon the inner truth, even when it puts them at odds with external expectations. So in this phase of power reclamation, we name and confront the inherited systems that have shaped our identities: patriarchal conditioning, religious dogma, cultural narratives of worth or obedience. So the heretic energy helps us see how we have internalized the hierarchy and how sometimes even our spiritual striving can become just another form of submission. To embody heretic power is to release the fear of exile and to choose an inner allegiance over an external validation. It is the fire that purifies false power. It is a necessary undoing before true sovereignty can emerge. The heretic says, I will not betray myself to keep the peace. This is not defiance for entertainment. It is defiance as devotion. And to embody this archetype in a healthy way, we must cultivate three things: discernment, clarity, and a regulated nervous system. Discernment allows us to distinguish between the impulse to react from our old wounds, from our old patterns, from what was ingrained, and the impulse to speak from what is our truth. Clarity helps us sort through the noise of all of these internalized voices, the parents, institutions, cultural messages, and identify what actually belongs to us, what is our truth. And the nervous system steadiness is what allows us to hold our truth without collapsing, right? Or without aggression. It is a standing in our center, because a dysregulated system either erupts or it shuts down, but a steady system can stay rooted. So when these qualities come together, the heretic becomes not a disruptor of peace, but a guardian of integrity. And that presence says truth is here and truth is safe to stand in. And so if you refer to your handout, you'll see that the essence of what the heretic is about and becoming conscious of this particular archetype is truth before approval. And so the courage gate, the gate we must walk through, is to have the ability to question, the courage to question, the desire to take that risk, the willingness to take that risk. The core invitation here is to consider what beliefs or systems or internalized voices must you risk betraying to be loyal to your soul. And so there's a couple of practices that I would like to invite you into to further deepen in this transmission and to bring it personal into your own life. So I'm going to share what these are, and then I encourage you to pause the recording, take the time you desire to explore these practices, and then come back to this temple teaching when you're ready. So the experiential element is a journaling question that is, where have I silenced myself for safety? Where have I silenced myself for safety? And oh boy, can that open a big can of worms. And I'm sure that you're already aware of a lot of the ways that you do that. I still do that. It is inherent in us. It takes courage and time and dedication and practice to keep um, speaking where we're used to silencing ourselves. And then there's an embodiment practice that I invite you to take part in, which is to write a declaration of inner allegiance and speak that aloud. Create a ceremony around it, light a candle, stand at your altar, repeat it 3 times, but write a declaration of inner allegiance. All right, so let's move on to the next archetype, which is the healer. This temple teaching is the art of integration. And so once we've broken from external authority, we meet this inner fragmentation that false power created. And so the healer brings compassion to the wounds that kept us compliant or kept us afraid. The healer teaches us that the healer teaches us that awakening without integration just perpetuates the fragmentation, right? So the heretic, that fire, if you will, burns down what is false. And then the healer comes and gathers the ashes and begins the work of making whole. So here we explore how shame and grief and self-judgment have fractured our inner world, and how compassion becomes the new architecture, the glue, the healing balm, the salve that brings us back into a more authentic expression of power. So, in this energy of the healer, we learn to sit in the presence of what we once tried to fix, because the healer is not here to fix. The healer does not restore by force, but through gentleness, by witnessing, by forgiving, and by allowing what was exiled to rejoin the whole. When we carry unintegrated trauma or unprocessed emotions, it distorts the way power moves through our system, right? Because instead of expressing it cleanly, truly, coherently, it gets filtered through our old wounds, our survival patterns, our internalized fear. And especially for sensitives and empaths, this can often show up as collapse, which is over giving, over explaining, over functioning, or we disappear ourselves to maintain harmony. For others, it may present as control. They go in a different direction, right? There's a tightening, a bracing, an over performing, a trying to manage outcomes very tightly and manage people as a way to avoid feeling what is unresolved. Neither of these patterns are truly who we are, right? They are adaptations, and they are the body's attempt to create safety in a world where emotional experience was overwhelming or unwelcome. And so the healer's medicine is not about fixing anything. It is about restoring coherence where the fragmentation once lived. So this archetype teaches us that emotional literacy is essential to power. And that literacy means to name what we feel, to speak it, to acknowledge it, to understand its roots, and to be with it without judging it or without abandoning ourselves. An embodiment is the container that makes all of this possible. When we allow ourselves to feel what we previously exiled, whether that's grief or rage or tenderness or fear, we reclaim parts of our power that were tied up in suppressing those emotions. So through this process, the healer brings the nervous system, the mind, the heart into alignment. Coherence is not the absence of struggle. It is the presence of integration. The healer is where we begin to understand that true power has a somatic signature. It is not conceptual. It lives in our regulated nervous system. It lives in how we're able to stay grounded and present and open, even in the presence of discomfort or uncertainty. This is what it means to have ease within the self. Not that life becomes easy, but that your internal world becomes a reliable and safe place to stand. So when the nervous system feels safe, the door opens for authenticity to become natural. Boundaries become organic, expression becomes honest. This kind of ease is what allows power to feel less like effort and more like just alignment. It's what allows us to move through the world without our walls, without our armoring, without collapsing, and without needing to override ourselves and our knowingness and our truth just to be accepted. In the healer, we discover that wholeness is not a destination, but a quality of presence. And so in your handout, you see that the essence, boiled down of this particular archetype is wholeness through compassion. This is in the journey from heretic to healer, we are experiencing this wholeness through compassion. And the gate that we must walk through, the courage gate, is the courage to feel. And the core invitation that rests here is the contemplation of what parts of you have you pathologized or tried to fix rather than love into inclusion. And so there's an experiential practice and an embodied practice that I would like to offer you here as well. And for the experiential element, I just want you to hold yourself. And if you can simply put your arms around you, wherever you'd like them to rest, whatever's comfortable, you can touch your face, you can stroke your heart, but give yourself an embrace if you can, and just say in your mind and feel in your body, feel the opening of your heart gate, if you will, a dropping of the door of the castle over the moat and welcoming home the exiled pieces of yourself, these exiled aspects. And again, pause the video to take the time you need to experience this. For the embodied practice, I invite you to do a hand to heart, right? So hand over the heart, and you can put your other hand over that hand and speak to yourself. Nothing in me is unworthy of love. And if it feels more powerful to say, I am worthy of love, you can say that as well, in addition or instead. But say that and feel into what parts of you need to hear that. Is there an inner child part that maybe rests in your heart that I am worthy of love? Or maybe your gut is tight and tense frequently. Nothing in me is unworthy of love, right? Touching your adrenals, touching your brain, your cheeks, like whatever part of you. Breathe that in, that nothing in me is unworthy of love, and I am worthy of love. And take the time you need, pause if necessary. And so we move now to the third leg of this journey into the archetype of the holy. This is the return to wholeness, this final movement. This is the embodiment of integrated power. This is when the heretic's truth and the healer's compassion unite. And from that, the holy is born. And this is not holy as something that's sanctified by religion, but a recognition that our very being is sacred. And the holy is not the perfected self, but the integrated self, right? The human and the divine, shadow and light, form and essence. The holy teaches that power is not about influence or dominance, but again, coherence, that quiet, unwavering alignment between our inner truth and our outer expression. And so by the time we reach the holy in this journey, something fundamental has shifted inside of us. We move beyond self-improvement into self-reverence. We stop trying to earn love or legitimacy. The need for permission dissolves because we finally trust the truth that has been living inside of us all along. This is not a loud declarative authority. It is a very not small, but quiet knowingness, right? It's an internal feeling of just being very settled inside of yourself, resting with that knowingness. When we no longer depend on others to confirm our choices, our worth, our path, our energy become more clean. Our decisions become clearer. We stop negotiating with ourselves to fit into places that we've already outgrown, where we don't belong. The holy invites us into a relationship with power that is rooted in self-recognition. When authority is reclaimed from within, then our lives start moving in alignment with what is authentic instead of what is expected. So the holy is an archetype of embodied stillness. It is the moment where power becomes effortless because it's no longer something we're trying to access or trying to demonstrate or trying to maintain. It's not a trying, it's not a doing. It emanates from who we are. And so in this state, our presence becomes the transmission. We discover that the most potent form of power is not found in striving or performing, but in our willingness to inhabit ourselves fully and without apology. The holy teaches that the deepest strength is found in being true rather than being impressive. Power becomes a natural expression of this coherence that I've been talking about. Our inner world and our outer expression align. They speak the same language. This is the kind of presence that influences without force and leads without effort. Sovereignty in its embodied form is not a rigid independence. It's not an emotional detachment. It is this coherence of our thoughts, feelings, body, all together, our actions, all operating from the same center. It is filled with compassion, the ability to stay open-hearted without abandoning ourselves. And it has an element of boundaries, very clear, grounded edges that protect our energy without creating walls around our humanity. So when these three qualities come together, life begins to move through you with ease rather than resistance. Your intuition naturally becomes sharper. Your relationships become cleaner. Your choices become more aligned. The holy shows us that when we move from coherence, compassion, and clarity, power becomes not something we do, but something we are, which is a very different concept than most of us grew up with or what we had modeled to us. And so in your handout, you see that the essence of the holy is really about power as presence. And the courage gate is the courage to embody, to fully inhabit yourself, to stand in your power. And the core invitation here is to consider, how does sacredness express through you when nothing needs to be proven? So the experiential element that I invite you to practice here is more of a contemplative piece, which is to sit with, I am that which I seek. And so you might take that into a meditative practice and speak it as a mantra, either out loud or in your mind. I am that which I seek. The embodied practice for this archetype is a ritual of gratitude around your aliveness. So again, take a moment to pause this recording, get a piece of paper, and write down your gratitudes, or speak them, extemporaneously if that feels better. Your gratitude for being alive, for having a body, for having the experiences that you've had in your life, for all of your relationships, the things that you love, to really sit with all of it as sacred, right? The mess, the exquisiteness of the extremes. As one of my teachers says, is the divine present even here? Yes, it is. And so, in that ritual of gratitude, holding all of your life experiences through the filter of how holy they are and that the divine has always been present, see where that takes you. And so now we come to our conclusion. What happens after we take this journey from the heretic to the healer to the holy? We come into a place of living the new paradigm of power, which is really about integrity made visible. So this closing segment synthesizes the three archetypal energies coexisting within us as a living trinity, right? They become the bridge between the inner work and the outer world. It's where sovereignty stops being a concept and becomes a way of life. This is the moment when the inner shifts that we've explored begin to reshape the way that we inhabit our bodies, our relationships, our choices, our leadership. Living the new paradigm of power is not something we visit occasionally. It is the ground that we walk on. And so, in this living field of power, truth moves without resistance. Authority is no longer imposed, it is embodied. This is where sovereignty becomes unmistakable. This quiet, grounded clarity that lives in the body, that informs the heart, that guides the mind. From here, power is not something we reach for or protect. It is something we express naturally without force. This is what it means to live the new paradigm of power, not as a role or an identity, but as the truest expression of who you are. And so in your handout, the essence of reaching this stage is really about truth in motion. And the gate of courage is the courage to live it as your daily expression. The invitation here is to contemplate, how does power move through you when it's not about control, but coherence? And so for this level, I invite you into a single embodiment practice. And before you do this, I'm going to instruct you what to do, and then again, pause and take the time you want to do this. But there's a graphic that is on the handout that has the triangle that has these three pieces, these three archetypes. So I invite you to take that in, take in the symbolism and the sacred geometry that you see there, and then do a standing meditation where you feel each of these archetypes within you. You feel the heretic lengthening the spine and feeling the truth in you rise, and where you feel the healer in you that helps soften the shoulders, soften the hardness, and feel compassion settling within you. And then you feel the holy within you, taking a deep breath and feeling your presence widen. And then take a moment to call upon your own coherence so that you can benchmark that, you can template that in your own system, that sensation of being aligned and steady, because this is what sovereignty feels like. This is sovereignty felt, not sovereignty thought. And so, as a final closing, I offer a powerful declaration that I'd like for us to say together 3 times. It is written at the bottom of your handout. And say it with me. I stand in my truth. I rise in my wholeness. I live as my own authority. I stand in my truth. I rise in my wholeness. I live as my own authority. I stand in my truth. I rise in my wholeness. I live as my own authority. May you meet yourself with honesty, with softness, and with an unwavering respect for your own becoming.